Hello everyone, this is Jose Mokhtarzadeh and you're watching my program on strategy. Since the world is changing quite fast these days, we probably need to adjust our strategies and management styles in life or our career to achieve our goals. So I asked experts about their strategies following and during pandemic. Very pleased to introduce Bob McGannon today. Bob is the co-founder and director of Intelligent Disobedience Leadership in Australia. Bob specializes in advanced leadership techniques, strategic program and portfolio management, and has established project management offices on 3 continents. Bob has worked with inexperienced to advanced business leaders from more than 15 countries with a wide variety of industry backgrounds. Bob has more than 30 years of IT, project management, and business analysis experience, 18 of those years with the IBM Corporation. His management experience includes technology outsourcing, IT delivery, service management and quality, business analysis, and advanced project management. He's also an author of Intelligent Disobedience that we will hear more about this today. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I apologize my pronunciation for your last name. Could you pronounce it?
It's McGannon.
McGannon. Sorry, it's just my English is
no,
my
that's
language.
Quite all right. Not a problem.
So how's life these days with all this pandemic stuff?
It's an interesting thing. I was just talking about this. I think it's a real interesting model what's transpiring. Those folks that are finding more compassion for themselves and for others are finding ways to pull their ways through, finding ways to pull their families through. And in some respects have made some really big discoveries or rediscoveries of each other and some of the things that, they're really passionate about. And those that are focusing on something less noble, shall we say, than compassion for themselves or for others are the ones that are struggling. And happily, I think in my own world, I'm really focusing on compassion and gratefulness and trying to help others try to do the same. So.
I think this is a great thing that you started with compassion, because most of the time when we deal with managers, we deal with even like leadership and everything. So most of the time we're thinking of like end point, and everyone wants to achieve things. And through achieving, you may actually do things that not necessarily, I'm not want to say ethical. We will get back to this because you have written a lot about this one recently. Yes. I took your course, which was really amazing. Well done on that.
Thank you.
The whole compassion idea and management and getting to the results, how do you combine these things together?
So I'm actually working with another company as well called Gwen Pennington Consulting and Coaching in Hobart. And we have a four quadrant model for compassion, which is called Compassionship actually. The first is you have to have compassion for your mission. Now, the root of compassion, the word, is to suffer with. So having empathy means I understand your feeling and I share your feelings, but I'm not necessarily going to do anything about it, right? Compassion is to suffer with, which means I'm going to take action. I'm going to be part of this. I'm going to try to advance something, go forward. So it's very important, first and foremost, to have compassion for the mission, right? But having compassion for the mission is not necessarily going to get it done, because you have to have compassion for the people that are involved in the mission. And third, and it's interesting that you talk about a very quickly changing world, and obviously, the COVID virus has caused us all to think about a number of different things. The third element after mission and people is capability, and the ability ultimately to be able to achieve what you wanted to achieve. And that means sometimes adjusting. It means being happy to be retrained. It means looking at different trends, different capabilities, different expectations of the marketplace, whatever the case may be. And the fourth and sometimes most difficult one that needs to be part of compassion is self. A leader that cannot express self-compassion is going to have a hard time being believed, if nothing else, when they're trying to be compassionate for others, particularly other people. It's the person that says, you should go home and you should get rest. And that manager is, that's telling people that is always there till 8 o'clock at night. It's like, all right, hang on a minute, what's the expectation, right? And is the expectation different from themselves or for me or whatever? So it's an interesting thing. And I think those people, those leaders that are able to balance that expression of compassion for all four of those things are the ones that are going to succeed. And dare I say, that is more and more needed in an environment where more corporate environments are becoming more toxic in terms of, you know, how people are treated and what the expectations are and how you go about installing, you know, change or trying to push or motivate people.
So that's actually an important point. So what part of it is the management and people who are managing. Part of it is, for instance, people who are basically, I don't know what to call them, like workers, you know, if you're like just an employee. So how would you...
Your frontline
Exactly.
workers, performance, I've heard them called performance individuals, performance level versus a management level, which I like.
Exactly. So how would you basically, so maybe for those frontliners, how do you incorporate compassion to your everyday life? Because you reminded me of a wonderful, like a cycle in terms of, they call it, like, I think you may know better, sacrifice cycle. So basically we just sacrifice, or whatever we do day in daily life, it's kind of a stress. But if we don't rejuvenate sort of what you mentioned, compassion for ourselves and the others, we cannot really release all these tensions, and then we cannot come back. So people do meditation, people do all sort of things, you know, whatever releases that. So that's basically compassion, or being self-awareness, you know, all these things would help. But I mean, for some people who are in the middle of it, especially with all these needs and pressure from peer pressure, management pressure, how can you handle it? How can you really do this?
So I think there's a really different way that we need to think about work. And by the way, what I'm about to say is not something that you can just decide to do tomorrow and the outcomes get created the day after tomorrow, right? This takes time. And I talk about this in my Intelligent Disobedience book, and I ask a question of leaders, and that is, do you have pretend employees? And here's what I mean. Do people walk into your office and have to pretend to be somebody else, or leave some aspect of themselves home, right? In order to feel as if they fit in and they're going to get some form of approval. If that's the case, they're spending energy on something else other than creating the outcomes you would like to have produced. So it's a matter of understanding the nature of who people are, accepting the diversity of thought, and that's a lot. You know, there's a lot going on now about diversity, and I'm really happy to say it's also now saying inclusion and acceptance beyond just bringing people of different thoughts together. You have to accept them in your organization and include their thoughts. And it's really focused on letting people do that. And candidly, some people are going to be in the wrong roles when you really learn who they are, and or if you have norms that just aren't necessarily productive relative to the people that you have in your organization. And so it may mean doing things slightly differently. It may mean having people in different roles over time. And hopefully it'll also adjust your view of how you hire people. I don't want to hire someone just because they have a capability. I want to hire somebody that's going to feel that they're at home when they're at work.
Trust basically will
There's
be within
trust is part of that. Acceptance is part of that. Being vulnerable as a leader to things that might be working and not working, and supporting people in your organization that may be vulnerable and saying this is uncomfortable, or I'm hoping to do this differently, and not discarding their view. I think toxicity, what I talked about earlier in my concern, comes from not having a place where we can express who we are. And that's not to say you have to, you know, there aren't behaviors that you're going to exhibit at home that you have to exhibit at work. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying is, are you authentic when you walk in the door?
Right.
Pretend to be somebody else.
What's the role of ego here?
Well, I think the ego comes to play in a whole lot of things. Ego, a position of ego is the exact opposite of a position of vulnerability. If I'm making decisions based on ego and protection, I'm going to react. If I am making decisions from the place of trying not to be fearful, being okay with making myself vulnerable. I can come from making decisions from a place of creativity versus reaction. And the leaders and managers that make decisions and take in new ideas and are open to being vulnerable and then using what they learn from that exercise to engage in a creative or co-creative process with the people that work for them and with them are going to create a lot. They're going to create a better environment. They're also going to get significantly better results.
That's excellent. So we didn't define intelligent disobedience, but you talked really nicely and bring them as an example. So can you put them in this context that where does it go and never with respect to ego and trust?
Yeah. So let me start with a bit of a definition of intelligent disobedience. That's fair. That is a phrase that comes from the world of seeing eye dogs. You don't want the seeing eye dog to obey its master's every command because they'll both get hit by a truck, potentially, right? If I'm standing at a signal, a traffic signal, and I can hear the signal turn to walk, but there's an electric car coming around the corner that I might not be able to hear, the dog needs to be able to disobey its master. That is intelligent disobedience. The intent is for it to obey its master the vast majority of the time. But when the outcome isn't going to be created that the master wants, it's time for the dog to disobey. Take that concept and put it in the world of management for a minute. We have processes and tools and rules and standards and ways in which we're trying to get things done. I, as a manager, I'm going to be better and create better outcomes more frequently if I am okay with bending, breaking the rules when the rules and the process isn't going to create the outcome it was intended to create. Better yet, as a leader, if I have the courage and the sustainability and the interest in working with people to help them develop the nature of intelligent disobedience that works in their environment, you can empower your people to do the same thing. I was saying, think of this. Two people go into work, and one of them is expected to follow the rules and is told their job is to follow the rules and to follow the process. And they're following the process, and they see that the outcome isn't going to be what the intent is, but they know that they're supposed to follow the process. So they follow the process and either don't achieve the outcome or sub-optimize the outcome that they achieve. And they're smart enough to have known that. And then they go home. Okay, to hold that thought for a minute. Then you have another employee that's got the ability to engage in some intelligent disobedience. They see that the process isn't going to work, right? They make a modification because they have the flexibility to do so. They're going to break the rule or bend the rule significantly, and it creates the outcome that process was intended to create. And this is going to happen 1% of the time, 2% of the time, whatever the case may be. It's not going to be something you do every day, okay? What do you think the dinner conversation is with that person that couldn't do a bit of intelligent disobedience? What do you think the tone of that would be versus the dinner conversation from the person that could?
Of course, quite different, yeah.
I would suggest, right? This is someone who can say they did something that ultimately contributed to the business and made a smart decision by not being the person that was supposed to follow the rules, but being the person that was supposed to create the outcomes. You want to say how a manager does this from an ego perspective? It's how you define someone's job. It starts right there. If the job is follow the manual versus create the outcomes, that's where the dialogue starts.
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. You wrote something in your book which has some relevance to myself personally as well. So you related to what Trump decided for those countries that banned them, from entering it. And I was in the States at that time, so I'm Australian, and I'm of course Iranian as well. So it was quite challenging to see that. So as an Australian, I had an Australian passport, and I used to go easily to the States, and still kind of can go, but not now, of course. Yeah. But you mentioned that someone, I forgot the name of that person, but there was a disobedience there, and someone lost her job, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I was talking about the former attorney, the interim attorney, the very first attorney general, interim attorney general.
Yeah, what would a
Who's
good leader do at in that situation?
so I obviously don't know all the ins and outs of the
Of
law
course.
underneath this situation. So I have to assume that the the attorney general ultimately had said, I do not think that this is a constitutional act, and has stated that, was commanded to do something else, and ultimately said, my job is to uphold the Constitution. You're asking me to compromise the integrity of my job and my own integrity. And so she resigned. I mean, now that's sort of as I interpret
So, yeah.
the story. But let's, that particular story may not have had those elements, but let's just talk in that context for a minute, right? From an intelligent disobedience point of view, you look at that and you say, is disagreeing a common thing to do in that environment, right? And if her job, if someone feels their job is to uphold the Constitution, uphold some law, or uphold their own interpretation of and be truthful to their own integrity, right? They have to do something. Resigning may be the only action. I would like to think in many cases there are other things you can try before you have to go to that regard. But, a lot of people in the Trump administration have found that they want to resign. I just find that interesting. It's an interesting common denominator without me understanding all the ins and outs of what led to those things. But it is interesting and it's notable how many people seem to do that. So I think the good leader finds ways to try to defend what they think is right, tries multiple times and in multiple ways, and is okay with putting themselves in a mildly difficult to potentially very difficult situation, all right, in upholding that integrity and maybe even resign and be subject to public scrutiny, which is what she did and others have done in other situations as well. I also talk about whistleblowers in the book, and someone says, it was whistleblowing an act of intelligent disobedience. And I go, I don't know. If whistleblowing is indeed done because someone feels they are, they're upholding their integrity, they're genuinely upholding what they think is right, and they have tried other means to communicate and to influence first, I'm okay with it. If it has a motive other than that, revenge, some sort of spiteful sort of a thing, if it's not based on one thing's integrity, I question, the whistleblower in that case. And I would not classify it as intelligent disobedience necessarily, right? So it's all about a business outcome. It's all about a moral outcome. It's all about the process of integrity. And it's not, intelligent disobedience is not about yourself. It's not about a personal gain. While you may get personal gain if you do engage in intelligent disobedience and get a better outcome in the examples I was just talking about earlier, you may get some personal gain from that. I have no issue with that, but that's not the reason you do it. The reason you do it is you have a responsibility to generate an outcome, and you understand that the right thing to do is to generate the outcome those processes and rules are intended to yield.
Excellent. I think politics is quite challenging, so we don't want to go there.
Yeah, I'm very mindful of the things that I don't know that I don't know. So I try to put it in more generic terms. Like I said, there's some interesting common denominators with the frequency of some things happening. That's an observation. You can make your own interpretations to what that means.
But I've become actually very interested in decision making, that process that you are, because at the end of the day, pretty much everything we do in our organization, and even like government level, we see that these days there's a lot of tough decisions that our governments can drive in Australia, even in Victoria, and there are lots of people who are engaging with. That's actually coming down to like university wise, or in small organization, you have to make a decision, right? And it would turn out, because of the things that changes these days quite fast. So like 10 days from now, say, oh, I made a big mistake. So how do you handle as a manager or as a leader or a project manager? You actually foresee these things, or actually your team would be behind you rather than just every now and then you really question everything from scratch. Say, oh, why did I do that? So how can you really be more prepared? Does the question make sense?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm totally following you, but let me try to go with this and see if, and go with this thought process and see if I'm on the right track. We talk about ego. There are decisions we make that ego will have us stick with.
Yep.
When we realize we've made a mistake, right? The vulnerability, creativity instead of reactivity should come to play, where you say, wait, this is not the outcome I was striving for. I'd like to adjust. And this is the basis upon which I made the decision. This is what I have now learned since. And I think, one of the things that I also talk about in the book, the Intelligent Disobedience book, is the difference between regret and remorse. Regret is something that you did, and it didn't turn out the way you wanted to. But assuming you had positive intent, right? Regrets go away. Remorse sticks with you for a very, very, very long time. And they said in the book, you drag it around like baggage, sometimes the rest of your life, because it's based on things you didn't do and you wish you had. Things that times you didn't say something when you saw something wrong. I would put the time when you make a decision and you quickly thereafter, be it 10 days or 10 minutes, whatever the case may be, you find out that decision is wrong, and you stick with it stubbornly from a place of ego. That to me is you're planting the seeds of remorse when you could have, would have, should have said, oh, hang on, I made a mistake. But fear and ego got in the way of doing that. I think you're planting the seeds of remorse that you'll think about for a long, long time. And I have had regrets for things I've done that haven't turned out right. And I have remorse for things that I didn't do that I should have done. And I take solace in the fact that those were really big teaching moments for me. So I'm not going to repeat that sort of situation where I get, another excuse to have remorse or to be more remorseful about something when I didn't do something.
Does this mean, Bob, that in order to be a great, as your book says, from good to great leaders, so you need to be the psychologist as well as the proper
I look, if someone understands people and has good intuition and is open to be able to ask a question and genuinely listen to the answer, I don't think you need to be a psychologist to do that. Now, do you need to be self-aware? Absolutely. Right. Do you need to be open to the things that are your strengths and are your weaknesses? Absolutely. Do I think that takes a psychology degree? No, I don't. Might it be useful once in a while to talk to someone with that background to help you with some things? Sure, potentially. But I don't think you need to be a psychologist to do that. We're surrounded by people and people's reactions. And if you don't understand someone's reaction, I think the greatest thing that you could do is just ask and say, I wish I understood. I apologize if I should understand, but I don't. Please help me and help me understand. And it could be some aspect of their profile, their personality. It could be they've had an experience in their past that was very, very different than yours, and you brought up that memory or that situation to them.
Triggered that, basically.
Absolutely. Yep. So, but you'll never understand if you don't have the presence and the confidence to say, there's something I can learn from this, and to be vulnerable and ask. And the times that I have done that, and I do it with great, I'm apologizing in the process, and I'm genuinely wanting to understand. The relationship that I have established with people has advanced significantly because I was open to do that. And I took the time to do it and try to understand it. There are times I haven't also, by the way. I'm not trying to point a halo over me, but it's a substantial thing to do. And again, I don't think you need a psychology study to do it.
I'm amazed, Bob, that, we were talking about project management. It's like maybe 20 minutes or so, but we mostly talk about people and how
project management's a people business.
This is an interesting point for me. Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you had someone that say, wow, the people were fantastic, but the technology was hard? While it happens, it's not too frequent.
That's right.
I don't have people beating down my door wanting to tell me that story, right? I have people. It's a people business.
Yeah.
And we are dealing with egos, and we're dealing with people that are happy to be creative and to be co-creative, and with people that are coming from ego and are dealing with fear for whatever reason, right? So that's what makes project management so interesting.
Is this what you guys deal with your clients? Trying to really pinpoint all these nitty-gritty stuff with people management, or you have other methodologies to help them?
Look, most of the training that I did in the time I owned a project management training business for 20 years, and most of the training I did and support that I provided to other senior leaders in IBM, and what I continue to do in coaching individuals in project management and mid and senior leaders now, which I continue to do, doesn't deal with figuring out the technology. It's helping people sort through their personal concerns, their own strengths and weaknesses, the perceptions they're receiving from others, how to work through conflict situations or reactions that they don't expect, sometimes even in themselves, right? And again, it's not therapy, so I can't do that, but it's, you just sort of help people talk through, sometimes their own ideas and where the origin is and what's causing them to hesitate when they know what to do. I mean, one of the most powerful questions I'll ask a leader is, all right, just clear your head for a minute. About this situation, is there something you're pretending not to know? Now, that's not the first question I ask people. It's a pretty deep one, right? But the number of times when I think that is what's going on, someone will pause, and you can watch their face. It's something that they know is difficult, or is going to take a long time, or is going to involve, they think, disappointing someone or whatever. And that is the solution. And they've been avoiding doing what they need to do to get to the solution. And then the question is the solution, is solving this problem worth what is preventing you from solving the problem? If that makes sense.
Right.
I mean, sometimes, a small problem that's going to really disappoint someone, you just decide to deal with it. It's okay. It's annoying, but I know that I'm going to be in a better position with this person in the long run if I deal with this annoyance, and it'll happen, whatever. And it'll be gone in 2 weeks. Okay, I'll deal with the annoyance. That's normally not the problems we're talking about when I ask that question, however, right?
No, that's excellent. So maybe I would love to keep just asking a question, because these are amazing points, and most, I was listening to someone the other day, and it was interesting. Say that you go, for instance, to an organization, you are in a position to do some dealing with technology, so you have been even trained for that. So you have like degrees, PhD, or whatever, and then eventually you learn more and more, and you become like a manager, and then you have people to do exactly what you were doing, but you're not basically trained for being a manager. So that's the educational system that really doesn't do that. So how do you see this? What should we do with that?
We make that mistake in Western society so often. We think a really good technical person is going to be a good manager, and the skill set is so different. And I think the way that we mentor, support, select and train leaders needs a serious reevaluation in many organizations. And you know, it's, I think the big difference is do you have the character to support other people to be successful as a means of making yourself successful? That you don't have to be successful in your own right. If you're leading people and they're successful, you're going to be successful. But when you walk into this and you're the technical expert, you're the big doer. You're the person that figures it out. You're the person that does things. You're the person that gets the pat on the back when you're done. And then you become a manager, and the expectations aren't different and really spelled out to you differently. It says, you know, we don't expect you to do that anymore. We expect, you know, Fred and Charlie and Jane and Susie and Ali and, you know, we expect them to do the work, to get these things done, to come up with the good ideas, and you're just to be the person that guides and supports them doing that. And then the person has to believe that that's what their leaders need, which is sometimes a challenge also, right? Because they've spent X amount of years being applauded to do something else.
Yep. Now suddenly, yeah, you're kind of competing as well sometimes, because you are the doer, and you know,
if you're not coming from a place of comfort and creativity, you are coming from a place of fear. And you hesitate to be vulnerable, which we talked about earlier. And you're right. You're viewing the very people you're supposed to lead and support as competition.
Yeah, I've seen in these situations, you know, firsthand. I'm sure you have seen many of these situations, and I've seen like people in leadership positions that are supposed to help and just guide, and you know, and then it's like, oh my God, they are sort of trying to like micromanage. It comes down to micromanaging. So then you start basically pushing your own agenda, because you just want to be the forefront. But the leadership is about being at the back and helping other people to basically be the sort of.
Yeah, you know, there's Susan Scott has written 2 books that I absolutely love. One called Fierce Conversations, and another called Fierce Leadership. And she says something beautiful. She says, I don't try to hold other people accountable, which is a weird thing to do from a leadership perspective in the language that we normally use. But she goes on to say, you can only hold yourself accountable. I can't make a promise to you, Hossein, without also making the promise to myself that I'm going to fulfill that promise to you, right? So it's not about what I promise to you. It's what I promise to myself and how much that promise means to me. So I have to hold myself accountable. Somebody else can't hold me accountable. I can take the punishment. You know, I'll do this or this will happen. Well, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't care. So it happens, right? So I can hold myself accountable. However, as a leader, you can hold other people capable, is what Susan Scott says. It's a beautiful statement. You're going to give them the support. You're going to give them the information. You're going to listen. You're going to coach. You're going to mentor. But if you don't understand and say, you know, and truly believe that they are capable of doing the things that they're supposed to do, or the things that you used to do before you became a manager, then you're going to micromanage, and one of you is redundant. Either you or the person that you're micromanaging, right? It's like,
that's right. Why?
And again, how's that person going to feel when they go home? And going back to one of the very, very early points I made in this conversation, how authentic are they going to be? I have to come in, put the mask on that looks like my manager to do things the way my manager wants things done. How much energy is lost because I'm pretending and not working on creating the outcomes in the way that's most comfortable for me?
Exactly. I think part of it may be, I think it's a big discussion. This one, you know, we see it in many organizations. The team working and like building a team is very encouraged. So let's do this. Let's, you know, work as a team. And then at the end of the day, an individual is being evaluated. So you say, okay, so that is something that you cannot really distinguish. You know, you can say KPIs for that particular person. So in the industry that I am, like I say, oh, let's collaborate, let's find, you know. But at the end of the day, let's say we publish a lot, we do in the industry work, and so I say what you did. So I say, okay, I'm just collaborating with all these people. They are publishing, so I'm part of that system. So you can't really argue that. as success.
It is a very interesting. Now, this is going to sound as if I'm being critical, so I will say it is a very interesting thing that the organizations that are teaching managers leadership and talking about teamwork in research and publishing research don't necessarily have a team-based model, or so it would appear to me. I find that an interesting dichotomy, actually, and really one that would be interesting to examine, and how you would take the principles of the training and apply it to that research model.
Yep.
Or maybe even more interesting would be to change the research model and then take the principles from that, put it into, how we teach young emerging leaders.
Right. Maybe this is something that maybe we should talk more about. I'm very interested, in learning more about how this is, because we do research a lot, we're doing collaboration with industries and stuff, but the thing is the mentalities are different, or maybe the KPIs are different. And then at the end of the day, there would be, like, as you said, like you're researching about performance, but your own performance is not really.
I think there's three elements here in teamwork. And I've been accused that this is overly simplistic, and I go, I don't think so. Want teamwork to work. One, you have a mission that matters. Everybody has to understand that there's something worthwhile that's going to come out of this. So they're happy to be part of a team to produce it. Two, everybody has the autonomy to get a role performed within that team, which means they have the tools and knowledge, capability, the ability to interact, whatever they need. They have the autonomy to get that done. And three, they understand what it is they're supposed to get done in the context of team and the context of I. So I am going to do this, and then I'm going to make that as a contribution to the team. Or you and I, Hussein, are going to work on this together because of our different skills. So we're going to sit, we're like, Carl Jung talks about two people are like chemical reactions, right? Two chemicals get together, you create something.
Exactly.
From the two chemicals, right? So I understand what that's going to be. If you understand what that is, the evaluation gets easy because you establish the expectations, and did you meet them or not?
That's right. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And again, is it overly simplistic? Maybe. Has it worked for me? Absolutely. If you figure out those elements, either someone is not going to participate and they're just not going to fit, and then you manage to make a change, or it comes together and it works. And the evaluation becomes really very easy because the team contributed to creating the outcome. And maybe it was, someone was part of the team for 10 minutes and someone else was part of the team for 10 months. That contribution of 10 minutes, if it didn't happen, was not going to create the outcome. Right. So there may be other ways you figure out what recognition looks like, but the recognition of did you get the job done is just as important for the person that took 10 minutes as it is 10 months. They may not get the same, financial remuneration based on how you do it, or however you want to figure that out. Right. There's sometimes some other models you could apply to this, but it's the recognition that you needed the person that was there for 10 minutes just as much as the person that was there for 10 months. If you didn't get that contribution to get the job done.
Yep. It's interesting. I really enjoy listening to you, Bob. I think it's like more than 30 minutes we're talking. Maybe later on we can catch up and continue. Is there anything else that you wanted me to ask you or to discuss?
Oh wow, we were going to talk about ethics, and we haven't talked as much about ethics. It's interesting. I have 2 courses on LinkedIn Learning on ethics. Yep. One on project management ethics, and it's focused on the Project Management Institute's model of ethics for project managers. There's another one out there that I had free reign to do things with, and it's called Business Ethics for Managers and Leaders. And in that course, I present a set of situations that don't have a real black and white answer. And because I think that's where the test of someone's ethical standing and their integrity and their belief system and how they're going to bring that to the decisions they make come to bear. Now I'm going to give you a scenario right now, and you're in Australia. You may know about this scenario. Those that may be listening to this aren't in Australia. I present this as an interesting case of ethical behavior, right? You've got a lawyer, a defense lawyer, that is representing people in organized crime, becomes aware of how hideous some of the behavior is in this lawyer's clients, and the lawyer becomes an informant to the police. Ethical behavior or not, right? And I mean, I can watch, you can watch people move from one side of the stadium to the other to engage in this argument. There's like, well, you took an oath as a lawyer as to how you were going to do this. No. Yes, but I have the means to, I have the opportunity and the means in front of me to prevent absolutely hideous crimes from occurring if I can report this to the police. I'll have fun with that one, right? You've taken a role. You've advertised that role. You've put yourself forward as being this person that does this job for individuals. And you broke your oath. That's unethical. I can also argue on the other side, it's unethical to see this, be absolutely certain that this absolutely hideous stuff is being done to people in society and not saying something about it. Gee, that's unethical. Yeah, that's correct. Right? I present, hopefully you or I or the people listening to this don't get into those situations very often. That's where you really have to think deeply about what legacy you left, what example, I had a really interesting conversation because I'm mentoring a couple that are running their own business, and they called me very early on in the COVID situation. And they said, we're thinking about this and we're thinking about that, and we're not sure exactly where to go. And I'm hoping you can help us with the thought process. And I said, I have one question. Yeah. I said, you have a 12-year-old son, right? Yeah. How will you explain the decision you made to him?
Sure. No, it will simplify things. Yeah.
What would you like your son to do? What ethically would you like your son to learn about business, about ownership, about dealing with adversity, and going forward in the risks that you want to take? Right now, their situation wasn't nearly as gnarly of ethical, lawyer, unethical as maybe the lawyer scenario, right? But it's like, how much do we put the family at risk versus cutting someone's hours or making them redundant, laying them off, whatever the case may be, and they've done very, very well. But it's like, there's your test.
That's right.
Explain your answer to your old time.
It's exactly right, Bob. It's amazing questions, and it shows that how challenging things could be, but they're not black and white.
It's a complicated world.
It's a
complicated world, and it's not becoming less complicated. It's becoming more complicated. And this goes all the way back to, what does the authentic person that is true to their fabric and true to their personal integrity feel is the right thing to do? Now, that's not to say that, we don't have people with some mental health issues and some other things where I'd say they truly feel this is the right thing to do, and it's go to shoot somebody on the street. Okay. I don't say that makes that okay, but I mean, all we can do is assume, without mental health, reasonable situations that someone's going to truly think through the pros and cons of this and understand the nature of the impact on themselves and family, other families, society, the neighborhood, whatever it is that's relevant, before they take some action, right?
I really need to take, I'm not sure if I have taken that course. Is it on LinkedIn now?
It's on LinkedIn Learning. Yeah, it's called Business Ethics for Managers and Leaders.
Awesome. So I would definitely take that one, and hopefully we can catch up again to talk. This is go ahead.
No, I said I also have a course. There's a really short course, about 35 minutes, called Leading with Intelligent Disobedience on LinkedIn Learning as well. That is segments from my book brought into living color, you would say. And we do things live and create little scenarios. It wasn't shot in a studio. It was shot on location in a number of different places.
Awesome.
So we had a bit of fun with that as well.
In Brisbane? In Brisbane?
No. I was in the studios, LinkedIn Learning Studios in Carpinteria, California, just south of Santa Barbara.
That's cool, because I was just going be MBS again more, because in Melbourne we are just 5 kilometers away.
Yes. Not yet. Someday, hopefully soon. I say someday, hopefully soon.
We'll get there. I really appreciate that, Bob. I have a lot of questions, as you can imagine. So this is a very hot topic. Personally, I have a lot of things. I've been to quite many leadership, workshops, small ones, but always still I wonder. So there's no right or wrong answer for ethics.
Often there isn't. Often there isn't.
A lot of quite challenging things and cultural things come. There's many aspects of it.
Yeah.
So I would love to learn more and more, just following you, and please keep going with the wonderful courses that you do.
I appreciate that. I think there are 2 people named Bob McGannon on LinkedIn.
Right.
I'm the one in Australia with the really white hair. That's all I'll have to say, right? If you go look, if you search for me on LinkedIn, you could probably find me and follow me or connect with me, however everybody wants to do that. So I'd like to share a lot of these views there.
That's awesome. And you have courses there. I'll put your link there as well below this video on YouTube.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then my website's intelligentdisobedience.com. So you can see some more there about some of the things. And I'm putting blogs, written blogs, awesome. video blogs. There's a reference to the book and some keynote addresses that I do for conferences. Now doing a lot of them more from the chair that I'm using while I'm talking to you. But maybe we'll get back to doing some live here before too very long. Right,
definitely. And industry partner, people can come for as your clients, basically, for if they in their business they want to just I mean, sure for individual coaching and discussions. I've worked with organizations including the United States Army Special Forces, the Green Berets. We have done workshops with the leaders in the Green Berets on intelligent disobedience, which when I wrote the book is like the last place I thought I'd be, would be in a military organization. But they have they have a thing that says, particularly in special forces, that the scenario that they run into when they ultimately get on the ground may be different than the one that they were briefed on before they got there. And so, when you get an organization that spent so much time training people to obey orders, you put them in this sort of situation and the statement changes to, they ought to obey the orders we should have given them had we known what they know. That to me is the exact definition of intelligent disobedience. The dog knows something that its master doesn't know. Yeah.
So even in a very, very strict rule-based follow orders environment like the military and the United States Special Forces, there's room for intelligent disobedience. And so, in fact, the need for intelligent disobedience. So I do work with organizations and managers on how to embrace this themselves and how to select and train and support individuals that report to them to use intelligent disobedience intelligently.
Thank you very much, Bob. We'll catch up hopefully again, and we learned a lot today by discussing with Bob regarding ethics, team building, intelligent disobedience, and many different ideas. I started first like project management ideas. I just wanted to discuss this, but as you know, all the discussions, it's wonderful to listen to Bob always. So thanks again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, and you too. And once again, I appreciate reaching out and having this discussion with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Bob.